The moment their eyes met across the crowded cafe, Michael knew his carefully constructed life was about to unravel. His former assistant Emma stood frozen, her hand protectively resting on her son's shoulder, a boy whose eyes mirrored his own in a way that made his heart stop. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that explore the complicated connections that bind us together. Your support helps us continue creating these stories that touch the heart. Michael Parker had mastered the art of functional chaos. At 42, he'd developed a system for everything, from managing his architectural firm to raising his 12-year-old daughter Lily as a single father. His morning routine was a precisely choreographed dance: wake at 5:30, prepare Lily's lunch while the coffee brewed, shower while she ate breakfast, and drop her at school before heading to the office. Today had started like any other Tuesday. He'd kissed Lily goodbye at the middle school entrance, watching her dark ponytail bounce as she ran to meet her friends. He'd planned to work through lunch, reviewing designs for the new community center project that had consumed his team for months. But a text from his sister changed everything. Mom's birthday gift arrived damaged. Need to pick up replacement downtown before dinner tonight. Can you help? Which is how Michael found himself at Riverside Cafe at 1:15 p.m., ordering a sandwich he didn't want while waiting for the boutique next door to finish gift wrapping a crystal vase. He was scrolling through emails on his phone when the bell above the door chimed. He wouldn't have looked up, wouldn't have noticed her at all, if not for the child's laughter that preceded them. Something in that sound made him raise his head, and there she was. Emma Reeves. His former executive assistant who had abruptly quit 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a resignation letter and a void in his office that 4 subsequent assistants had failed to fill. She hadn't seen him yet. She was smiling down at a boy of about 9 or 10, her hand resting on his shoulder as she guided him toward the counter. Her hair was shorter now, falling just below her chin instead of the long waves he remembered. But everything else, her graceful movements, the way she tilted her head when listening, remained unchanged. Michael's first instinct was to leave. Their parting hadn't been pleasant. After 2 years of working together seamlessly, Emma had resigned without warning. No 2 weeks' notice, no explanation beyond personal reasons cited in her letter. He'd been angry, then hurt, then resigned to never understanding why his most valuable employee had abandoned him when he'd needed her most. But before he could gather his things, the boy turned, scanning the cafe with curious eyes that landed directly on Michael. Eyes that were a striking shade of blue-gray. Eyes that Michael saw in the mirror every morning. The boy tugged at Emma's sleeve and pointed. When she followed his gesture and saw Michael, the color drained from her face. "Mom, isn't that the man from the pictures?" the boy asked, his voice carrying across the quiet cafe. Michael stood, his legs moving without conscious thought. 3 years of questions suddenly crystallized into one impossible answer as he approached them. "Emma," he said, his voice barely audible. "Michael." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she placed them protectively on her son's shoulders. "This is unexpected." "Mom?" The boy looked between them, confusion evident on his face, a face that now, up close, showed unmistakable echoes of Michael's own features. "Jason, this is Mr. Parker. I used to work for him." Emma's voice was controlled, professional, as if introducing her son to any former colleague. But her eyes told a different story as they met Michael's, pleading, fearful, resolute. "Hi, Jason," Michael said, extending his hand automatically while his mind raced. The boy was 9, maybe 10. Emma had left 3 years ago. Before that, they'd had. He stopped the thought, focusing on the child's hand in his. "Nice to meet you." "You too," Jason replied, studying Michael with an intensity that was unsettling. "Mom has a picture of you getting an award. She keeps it in her desk." Emma's cheeks flushed. "Jason, why don't you go pick out a cookie while I talk to Mr. Parker for a minute?" Once Jason was out of earshot, the carefully maintained composure in Emma's expression cracked. I can explain. Can you? Michael kept his voice low, conscious of the other patrons. Because I'm looking at a boy who appears to be about 10 years old, with my eyes and my mother's chin, and I'm struggling to understand how this is possible. He's 9, Emma said, as if that detail mattered. His birthday was last month. Michael did the math quickly. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. Were you going to tell me? Ever? Emma glanced toward Jason, who was deliberating between cookies at the counter. Not here, Michael. Please. The bell above the door chimed again as new customers entered. Michael nodded toward a small table in the corner. 5 minutes. I deserve that much. They sat across from each other, the small table between them like a demilitarized zone. Emma kept her eyes on Jason, who had selected a chocolate chip cookie and was now chatting animatedly with the barista. He's mine. It wasn't a question, but Michael needed to hear her say it. Yes. Emma met his gaze directly. Jason is your son. Despite having already reached this conclusion, hearing the words aloud made Michael's chest tighten. Why didn't you tell me? Emma's fingers twisted the paper napkin in front of her. You were going through so much. Your wife had just died 6 months before. Lily was struggling. The firm was in financial trouble. You were barely holding it together. She paused. And we weren't. It was one night, Michael. One moment of comfort that turned into something neither of us planned. Michael remembered that night with painful clarity. 6 months after losing his wife to cancer, drowning in grief and responsibility, he'd stayed late at the office. Emma had stayed too, helping him prepare for a crucial presentation. They'd ordered dinner, opened a bottle of wine from a grateful client. One moment they'd been reviewing blueprints, the next. That doesn't explain why you disappeared, he said. You could have told me. We could have figured something out. Could we? Emma's voice held a challenge. You were my boss, Michael. You were grieving your wife. You had a 6-year-old daughter. The last thing you needed was your assistant telling you she was pregnant after one night together. That wasn't your decision to make, Michael said, anger finally breaking through his shock. He's my son. I had a right to know. You're right. The simple admission surprised him. I was wrong to keep him from you. I was scared and confused, and I made a choice I thought was best for everyone. But watching Jason grow up, seeing him ask questions about his father, I've regretted it more with each passing year. Michael glanced at the boy, at his son, who was now sitting at a table near the window, focused on his cookie and a book he'd pulled from his backpack. Does he know about me? He knows his father is an architect who designs beautiful buildings. He knows you and I work together. He knows you have a daughter. Emma hesitated. But he doesn't know you're his father. I told him his dad wasn't ready for a family when he was born. The unfairness of it hit Michael like a physical blow. Not ready? I already had a family, Emma. I was already a father. I know. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry. I was 26 and terrified. I made mistakes. Jason looked up then, catching them watching him. He waved, and Michael automatically waved back, a surreal feeling washing over him. He had a son. A 9-year-old son who had been living across town, growing up without him. Where do we go from here? Michael asked, his anger giving way to a more complicated emotion. That depends, Emma said carefully. What do you want, Michael? The question hung between them as Jason approached the table, cookie finished. Mom, can we go to the bookstore now? You promised. Emma smiled at her son, their son, with such love that Michael felt a pang of loss for all the moments he'd missed. In a minute, honey. Mr. Parker and I are just catching up. Jason turned to Michael with open curiosity. Mom says you design buildings. I want to be an engineer when I grow up. I'm really good at math. Is that so? Michael found himself smiling despite the turmoil inside. I was good at math too, at your age. Mom says I get it from my dad. Jason's statement hung in the air, innocent yet loaded with meaning. Michael met Emma's eyes over their son's head. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that the truth would have to come out, that their lives were now irrevocably connected. Jason, Emma said gently, why don't you go read for a few more minutes? Mr. Parker and I need to finish our conversation. Once Jason had returned to his table, Michael leaned forward. I want to know him, Emma. I've lost 9 years already. I don't want to lose any more. Emma nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I know. And he deserves to know you too. She took a deep breath. But we need to do this right. For Jason's sake. And for Lily's. Lily. Michael hadn't even considered how this would affect his daughter. How would she react to suddenly having a half-brother? After losing her mother at 6, how would she feel about this new complication in their carefully balanced life? We'll take it slow, Michael said, making the decision as he spoke. We'll find a way to make this work. Emma reached across the table and briefly touched his hand, the first contact between them in 3 years. Thank you. For not hating me. I don't hate you, Michael said truthfully. I'm angry and hurt and confused. But looking at him, he nodded toward Jason, I can't regret anything that brought him into the world. They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet that weekend to begin the delicate process of introducing Jason to the truth. As Emma and Jason prepared to leave, Michael felt a strange mixture of loss and anticipation. He was watching his son walk away, but for the first time, he knew he would see him again. The drive home from the cafe was a blur. Michael called his office to say he wouldn't be returning that afternoon, citing a family emergency, words that held new meaning now. He picked Lily up from school early, something he rarely did, and took her for ice cream. As she chattered about her science project and the upcoming school dance, Michael studied her face, searching for similarities to the boy he'd just met. They shared his eyes, certainly, though Lily's were framed by her mother's long lashes. Would they get along? Would they recognize something of themselves in each other? Dad, you're being weird, Lily said, waving her spoon in front of his face. You haven't heard a word I've said. Sorry, sweetheart. I've got a lot on my mind. Is it work stuff? The community center? Michael shook his head. No, it's personal stuff. Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about. Lily's expression grew serious. At 12, she was perceptive beyond her years, a side effect, perhaps, of losing her mother so young. Are you sick? Like Mom was? No, nothing like that, Michael hastened to reassure her. I'm perfectly healthy. It's about our family. Are we moving? Because I really don't want to change schools again. We're not moving. Michael took a deep breath. Lily, what would you think about having a brother? Her spoon clattered against the dish. Are you getting married? No, no. This was going all wrong. It's complicated. I just found out today that I have a son. You have a half-brother. His name is Jason, and he's 9 years old. Lily stared at him, ice cream forgotten. How do you just find out something like that? Michael struggled to find an age-appropriate explanation. His mother and we knew each other before, when Mom was sick. She never told me about him until today, when I ran into them by chance. Does he know? About you being his dad? Not yet. We're going to tell him this weekend. Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing. Does this mean he'll live with us? No, he lives with his mom. But we'll spend time together. Get to know each other. Will you love him more than me? The question was asked in a small voice that broke Michael's heart. Lily, no. He reached across the table and took her hand. I could never love anyone more than I love you. You're my daughter, my whole world. Having Jason in our lives doesn't change that. It just means our family is a little bigger than we thought. She nodded, but uncertainty lingered in her eyes. Can I meet him? Soon. We need to tell him the truth first, and then give him some time to adjust. But yes, I want you two to meet. Is his mom nice? Michael thought about Emma, her kindness, her efficiency, the way she'd stepped up to raise their son alone. Yes, she's very nice. You've actually met her before, when you were little. She used to work for me. Lily's eyes widened. Was she your girlfriend? No, nothing like that. We were friends. It was a simplification, but sufficient for now. This is really weird, Dad. Michael laughed despite himself. Yes, it is. For all of us. But we'll figure it out together, okay? Lily nodded, then returned to her melting ice cream. I always wanted a brother, she said after a moment. But I pictured a baby, not someone almost my age. Life rarely gives us exactly what we expect, Michael said, thinking of how dramatically his had just changed in the space of an afternoon. The days until Saturday crawled by. Michael threw himself into work, reviewing designs and meeting with clients on autopilot while his mind constantly returned to Jason. He found himself studying the boy's features in his memory, cataloging similarities and differences. He wondered about his personality, his interests beyond math and books, his dreams. He also thought about Emma. The shock of seeing her had initially overshadowed everything else, but as the days passed, he remembered how well they had worked together, how she had been his right hand during the darkest period of his life. She had organized his schedule, managed his clients, and even helped with Lily when babysitters fell through. Her departure had left a void that extended beyond the office. Had there been signs of her pregnancy that he'd missed? Looking back, he recalled her increasing preference for loose clothing, her occasional morning absences, the way she'd stopped joining the team for after-work drinks. But he'd been so consumed by grief and responsibility that he'd barely noticed. Saturday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in Michael's stomach. They had agreed to meet at Emma's house, neutral territory for Jason, but private enough for a potentially emotional conversation. Lily would stay with her aunt until evening, giving Michael time to navigate this new relationship before bringing the siblings together. Emma's home was a modest bungalow in a family-friendly neighborhood about 20 minutes from Michael's own house. The